Let's find out together in this long-ass video, the journey to the east to save NA Esports. Okay, so starting off with the prelude, back in January 2025, the group that was responsible for bringing together the first community tournament was also gathered together in secret in order to sort of select the people that were going to the invitational, right? We didn't really know what it was for at the time, so we just put together a list of some of the best players from that community tournament, and also players that we thought were like really good and prominent at the time. That is how the selection process went, full disclosure right there. So I was asked to be the team manager for this invitational for the two NA community teams because I spoke Chinese, I did tourism in the past, and I was also partly in charge for the community tournament. Essentially, if you have seen Build Fighters, Gundam Build Fighters, I was playing the role of Rambo Rao, the old mentor figure who drove the kids everywhere and took care of them while they battled with their plastic toys. Now, we did have to go through a complicated process of building the teams because, well, this is a sudden trip and not everyone who was asked to go can go, even though this was an incredible opportunity. So, for example, Falcon Punch and Celestial were asked to be a part of the invitational from the community tournament. However, a lot of the Falcon Punch members couldn't make it. There was a lot of complications going forward, but eventually, EMP and Orca were formed out of the people that we asked. And this is a really good time to shout out the team leads for both teams. So Orca's lead is Charlotte, and she plays the support role, plays a lot of Lumine, Tanaka, stuff like that. And for EMP, their team lead was Ancilia. Ancilia was a Hurricane player and also transitioned into the full tank role from there. These were two top-level teams that were really good at the game, but we had a lot to do before the Chinese tournament. So we had to give them a little bit of practice, a little bit of stress, a little bit of a quiz before the real final test. So then, what can we do from there? Well, there was the community tournament 2.0 that we hosted from the moderation team of the Mechabreak server. And we actually had to spend a lot of time bringing that together and then putting it forth because the officials were busy with, the Chinese tournament. organizational team and I put forth the second community tournament the literal day before the Chinese bound teams flew out to their destination. And boy, that community tournament was a heck of a lot of fun. Mostly because it showed me that there was a lot of talent out there for the Mechabreak competitive scene. There is an upstart team called Michelin Star Restaurant, MSR, and they freaking cooked in the tournament. They had a really strong composition, focusing on the double heavies, the Tricera, Stego, and then they also had double melee, which is Welkin and Lisness, and then finally an Aquila and Illuminate. That is probably the most meta build you could have gotten during that entire segment, entire tournament. And this is really important because it set the stage, the meta stage of where NA thinks the meta is before we go into China and have all of our expectations broken. MSR never deviated from that composition, and they played it really well. So much so that MSR did take down both Orca and EMP in the community tournament. Now, I would really want those guys to stick together and come back whenever the game releases, because I definitely want to invite them to the next invitational whenever that happens. For the international teams going to China, though, this was a big roadblock that they needed to overcome, and I think they will eventually do, because we have 2 days of hard practice days that we need to really lock in for the best of the best. And I think that because MSR presented such a challenge in the community tournament, really motivated the international teams to get their stuff together for that Chinese tournament environment. But before we can actually play any more of the game, any more of Mechabreak, we have to go through 24 hours of hell.
Where's the land source? Right here,
Day 1, 24 hours of hell. International travel, if you didn't know, is stressful as hell. And that's just a fact. And it's even more stressful if you have a bunch of first-timers who have never traveled ever before. And that means you have to be really careful, especially on long journeys. You never know what can happen. And boy, did a lot of things happen on this trip. So after a brutal 14-hour flight, we landed in Guangdong Airport. I helped everybody through customs, and we had to get on a 3-hour bus ride to our actual destination. So for some of the team, they've been traveling for a day, 24 hours already. And that's really fucking hard. Yet spirits are high. First day, we're landed. We got some Chinese KFC, which was baller, by the way, in us. And we were on our way to Viridian City, also known as the CSUN campus, or Kingsoft campus, as they call it. Because when we arrived, there was a big Kingsoft building looming over everything. But man, when we rolled up to the hotel, we were in shock. The campus was beautiful. It was genuinely an awesome place to be. The hotel was seaside, and inside somehow was cooler than the outside of the hotel. And in the rooms of all of this, there was some really cool stuff waiting for us. There was some Mechabreak themed packages, including those awesome 3D arts that you might have been able to see around and get some glimpses of. And I did finesse my way into getting 3 3D arts. I got another Listeness, a Panther, and I think an Arakami. So I will be giving the Listeness out in sort of a giveaway fashion when the game actually comes out. So stay tuned for that. But I would also love to take this moment and shout out our community manager, Purum. There is no better community manager for Mechabreak in the world. I think this guy is the coolest because he was responsible for all the NA community teams to cross over into China. And boy, that was a really, really hard thing to do. This man works extremely hard in the background, and I can't not give him more praise for all the stress that he had to endure with us on this trip. Heck, he even took us to dinner to show us like what real Cantonese food tastes like, and spoiler alert, it tastes freaking awesome. After the dinner, we started to scatter, which, everybody was tired, so some people went to sleep, some people went to train in the training room. I started to wander around. I really like to wander when I'm on international trips, but I also somehow landed in a table in the hotel with all of the English-speaking casters for the tournament, all the NA casters. And the NA caster lineup was big. It was huge. It was important. So it was Jake, Dia, Remington, and Lemon Kiwi. And these are all veteran casters at the top of their games. I've never met, esports celebrities or celebrities in general before, but I think they were approachable, fun, and nerdy as hell. We talked a lot about the game, obviously, and I learned that they are very hardworking individuals who I've gained a lot of respect for. And it's not an easy job being in the public eye, and being able to talk with them throughout the week have given me a lot of insights into casting as a whole, esports maybe as a whole, but more on that later, because I was unfortunately pulled away from that table in order to deal with some. Okay, let's play a game, shall we? Let's play a game called Count the Emergencies. On the top left or right of the screen, there's going to be a count of all the emergencies that happened on this wonderful trip. Starting off with number 1, Qatar Airlines sucks. They did not want to fly out 2 of our Orca members out to China, and we had to get new flights very quickly. Thank you, Season support staff, Riven, Jesse, and Ethan, for helping us out throughout the trip and also helping us get the flight tickets super fast, or else they would have 2 members would just never have made it to China, effectively forfeiting Orca forever. That would have really been sucky. But also what is sucky is there is an evil 7-Eleven at the campus where we stayed at that bricked most of the team's electronic payments, and we had to call our banks in order to get that fixed, like Alipay or WeChat Pay and stuff like that. But it was a pain in the ass because only some of us had local SIM cards that had a phone number that can do international calls. It was a whole thing. Plus, man, there was somebody who lost their luggage coming in from SF. They never brought their luggage over. There was somebody that lost their wallet and disappeared for a couple of hours, and the end of the night, that's what I got called out for from the casters table. There are just so many things that went wrong, and honestly, that's just a part of any trip. Being a manager means that you have to be responsible for all the eventualities that arise, right? I was super stressed while I was dealing with all those things, but at the end of the day, looking back, it was all pretty minor stuff that have become a bit of a fond memory, because sometimes it is hilarious how that happened or how it got resolved. But one thing that is not very fun is sickness. So when you're international traveling, there is always a threat of sickness, viral agents that you're not prepared for. Your body is not accustomed to all of those things. So we had a lot of people getting sick starting from day 2. One of the EMP members was sick from the morning and had to get up at around 6 a.m. or so to try to help them do that. And they ended up having to go to the hospital for an entire day. And that really blew for EMP because they needed that practice day. Practice was super important on day 2 and day 3, just because, well, as you know, all of the best teams, the best community teams are there. And if you were missing day 2 and day 3, you were missing perhaps months or years of scrim knowledge condensed into a little part. And we did get a full sort of tour of the Kingsoft office. It is probably one of the most modern looking business office parks I've ever been at. And one of the cool things that they did was, in their usual event space, they set up this whole custom LAN environment. It was like a big LAN party, the coolest LAN party I've ever been in. They set that environment up so that all the international teams are playing right next to each other. And as I explained before, being able to play together on those 2 days, those 2 practice days, were huge for the development of new meta strategies or getting used to how other regions plays. The cross-region sort of like experience meshing was super cool to witness and experience, and super interesting because, again, I've never been I'm not like a huge esports guy, I'm not like a huge in the business of that kind of guy, but it was so interesting to see how everybody was so friendly and just walking up to each other, asking for games, asking for scrims, and being very polite and stuff toward each other. No animosity at all, because we're all like community teams, right? And within that environment, we ended up coming to some important conclusions. So at the day's end, we discovered that one, Inferno is really, really fucking good. We didn't get to play Inferno in a lot of the open beta February just because it was impossible. It wasn't like impossible, but maybe only like 2 or 3 people that we knew, even from the elite testing servers and stuff like that, actually had access to Inferno. So we didn't really know how good it is. The Inferno ended up being the best tank buster in the game. The double tanks, Tricera and Stego, were really weak to energy damage. We just didn't know how weak or how good Inferno can get. All of China was using Inferno. They knew Inferno was good because they had a larger server size, and which means like more people unlocked Inferno and they were able to grind more for that. And JP very quickly did adopt Inferno. And it wasn't until day 3 that NA was able to really fit Inferno into the composition. On day 2, Orca started discovering that, hey, Inferno is really fucking good. And MDB got really excited because they were about to like switch him off to do Tricera things, but we found out that Inferno is like really good, so he got to play Inferno again. So then I guess that leads into talking about Team Orca and their lineup. So as I said before, MDB is their prime Inferno. Orca's composition is very, very aggressive because they have 2 more attackers onto that list. Actually, no, sorry, like 3 more attackers. So they have 2 melee with John Welkin on Welkin and Salapezant on the Listeness, and then they have Happiness on Aquila. So they have a 4 attacker setup with Stego being the only heavy in there, played by Deacon, and also the team captain Charlotte plays Lumine as their only support. And what they can do with this is that they can kill really, really fast. But it's also really hard for them to play defensive. And that's why they play Stego, so that they can smoke up and play more defensively with that, rather than Tricera's, just raw HP value. So that is the team that they play. And I have to say, it is a very effective way for how they play. They really want to get in there and start taking down the enemy's death timers. If they can get a kill, they can keep spiraling those kills with the amount of damage that they're able to pull out. Now, EMP's team lineup I will talk about later because they've had some trouble obviously trying to set that up. Mostly because they are missing a member, and also they didn't have that much time to practice compared to Orca before coming to China. So they've had a rougher time trying to set everything up. So we will be talking about the team composition a little bit later in the video. I want to continue talking about Inferno's strengths, right? And one of the biggest things about Inferno in that super heavy meta that we were playing, because everybody was running Tricera Stego, like literally everybody and their mothers were running Tricera and Stego, because it was just so effective. You get the raw HP, you get the Stego smoke to get the Tricera shields back up, you get the healing from the Tricera drones. It was a nasty combo. You know what I mean? It was just disgusting, and every team was abusing it, which is why I'm really hoping that new strikers will be introduced besides Inferno to really kill the lockdown heavy meta that they have. And one of Inferno's greatest strengths is to be able to make those lockdown heavies move. especially with their raw ramping damage on the chest beams. And also, the Inferno has a lot of great verticality. And you might not think that a super heavy attacker has a lot of verticality, but it actually has a lot of flying power, and it would be able to get that angle where the flyer is above the Tricero Osego at the precise angle so that the lockdown attackers cannot shoot back up. And Inferno's laser does hit at that extreme angle if it was locked on. So it creates a very unpleasant sensation for the heavies to get lasered from above and not be able to retaliate. So that's why Inferno was super good, and they did abuse that. Most of the teams understood how to do that, and Orca very quickly, started to use that tactic as well with their own Inferno. And the second conclusion we kind of came up with at the end of day 2 is that we can't just one trick anymore. And this is sort of an NA problem only, because I didn't see any other teams really, or any other international top teams really struggle with this. Is one tricks, most of the Chinese teams were able to play 2 to 3 strikers, and they came in with that knowledge after exploring the ban system. But I feel like both of the community teams that went to China, but also all the community teams, or most of the community teams, hello bird, that were playing the community tournament, had the problem of you can really only play that one thing to victory, and you kind of can't do that in this ban and pick system, which is why I really like the ban and pick system. Which it's a very, very good system, considering that we are going to have a lot of strikers in the game. If what I've heard on the journals, or the interviews are right, they're saying that they want to introduce 3 strikers per season, which is a lot. That is a lot of new units in a very short amount of time, and you cannot one trick anymore, since if you are introducing a ton of new variables into the meta every time, then you're gonna have to know how to play everything. And the attacker role will be less of oh, I am the best Aquila, or oh, I am the best Falcon, or I am the best Tricero Stego. It will be more oh, I am the best defender and I know how to play literally every heavy, or oh, I'm the best flyer player and I know how to play every flyer. So that is, something that it should have been really obvious, but I guess we didn't really pick up on that because we were so used to playing the general beta, open beta-ness, where you could just lock in your own striker and just play that until you are literally the top of the leaderboard. And I would totally encourage that if you're building your own team, to find, if you're building it with your friends, find what they're good at playing, find what they have fun playing. But I feel like as a team captain, if you are trying to build a team, you should be playing every striker on the roster. You should at least know how to play every striker, where they should be positioned during every match, and how their kits work. Because if you don't, then what right do you have to tell anybody else how to play better? Or at least that's what I think about it. It's just that sometimes I feel like when you're reviewing a game or something like that, and you see somebody who is playing a melee character, and you don't know how to play a melee character, well, how are you going to tell them to improve if you don't have at least even a basic understanding of how they're going to position or what they should be doing at that moment? At the end of day 2, we did get our EMP member who was sick at the time back from the hospital. It took him a whole day, but they did give him some medicine and he'll be fine by day 3. However, okay, that was the good news. The other news is much more devastating because the brackets released. And when the brackets released, I was losing it. I think most teams were losing it because it looks really, really messed up. It looks almost rigged. And I could swear to you that it's not, because I've talked to people who were at the polling and the drawing, and it wasn't rigged. That was a pure luck of the draw, random pulling that just so happens to put all of the like international teams with each other and all of the NA teams with each other, which is just kind of like bad luck, but also kind of hilarious at the same time. How does this even happen? Complete chance, by the way. I just, in hindsight, in very much hindsight, you know, having these two teams fight together or fight each other early is also beneficial because it means that they will be put against different teams, and in the lower brackets and the top brackets, like one could go top, one could go bottom, right? And it will also means that they can get this like animosity out of the way in the beginning, so that the rest of the days they can like very much cooperate and help each other. So in hindsight, it was very much a good thing. At the moment, I was like, fuck. I did hear also that the esports director for Mechabreak was also balding at the brackets because, again, it looked pretty messed up, right? It looks like somebody set that up. So I guess like I wasn't the only one, which makes me kind of happy. Day 3, rising pressures. So, you know how one EMP member went to the hospital? Well, we traded that for an Orca member who had to go into the hospital now that the EMP one is back. It was just a whole bunch of sicknesses, so we add another one to the counter right there. And another thing is that since Orca's member was going out, I technically was their official sub player. So on this day, I subbed a lot for Orca as we played some of the Japanese and Chinese teams. And one of the ones I remember the most was against a team called Rejects. Now, against Rejects, I was subbing in for the Tricera and Inferno role, and they basically didn't really need me for most of the game. So I had a good idea of where their level was at against those guys. And I think Orca had a really, really strong position from that point because they've got their comp together and they know what they're going to do. And we talked about how they were incorporating back more offensive capabilities into their composition. All right, so EMP has to figure out their composition in this wacky world where NA didn't know that Inferno was actually viable. So they were scrimming anybody and everybody they can get their hands on in order to just get the practice in and also figure out what they're eventually going to play, because man, this meta has been a whole mess for them. Okay, I wanted to highlight here the importance of team compositions and playing to each player's strength, right? So there is the meta, but the meta is always changing. It's a fluid thing that will always be iterated on, right? But you know what doesn't change? People don't change that easily. And your players' preferences are not going to change at the drop of a coin or the tip of a hat. We need to, or you as a team captain, needs to understand that whoever your players are comfortable and good at playing is what they eventually should be playing despite what the meta says. And in Mechabreak, you definitely want at least one support player, preferably a healer, one tank player, probably lockdown like Stego or Tricera, and 4 players that just needs to be able to flex whatever they can. And that flexibility is now super important as we are coming to understand the picks and the bans and the map picks and how the competitive structure is going to develop from now on. We had incredible players on EMP that needed to figure out where they can go. During the practice days, there was also some really important matchups in order to get, especially those cross-regional matchups to get more information on the other teams before the games even begin, or the real games even begin. And what we found through those, some wins, some losses, were that Japan is really strong. Japan is probably the strongest region out of all 3 of the regions that have been invited. Then was China, and then of course it was near airport. And the top teams that were on or in the competitive space was, I think, from what we saw during those practice days, Anubis. Anubis was number 1. It was either Luna Break or Celestial Being second. Then it was EVA. Those were the top 4 that I think represented the best of what Mechabreak competitive can look like at that moment. Represents the wall that our teams had to overcome in order to secure the top 4, the top 3 spot. I feel like this is also a really good spot to talk about the other 2 NA teams. That was Team Liquid and DSG. I don't really have that much to say about DSG because we didn't really get to interact with them. They essentially were never in the training room, and even on the other events, they were kind of sparse. I know they're like Overwatch players who've been dragged into the game, so I don't really blame them for not having too much interest in this, I don't know, super cool arena fighter. But we did get to interact a lot with Team Liquid. In fact, one of their members reached out to me before the tournament asking for like meta compositions or like training and stuff like that. So Team Liquid practiced a lot, I feel like, during that time that we were able to scrim. I mean, both Orca and EMP players love the game, and I love the game too. So we were all like trying to help each other succeed in the best ways, and the other regions were doing that too. When I see Celestial Being, they would be always talking to the other Chinese teams in order to improve their play, and it was just like a really nice environment to be. One thing about AI is that one day I wish, I mostly hate AI, but one thing I wish is that we're able to do like an automatic, instantaneous language translation that is able to just like be plugged in like a earpiece or something. Because I wanted to talk with all of those top Japanese players. I was able to sort of converse with the Chinese players, but the cross-regional communication was still kind of rough in a lot of places. But the knowledge that we gained from playing each other definitely stuck around, and we learned how to transition on maps. We learned how to stack units on top of objectives. We learned the timing of the spawn points, and there was just so much that you could gather being in that competitive space, being at that LAN party. Like, we were all there for the love of the game. And you know who else is there for the love of the game? Freaking Chris. John Mechabreak, Chris Mechabreak himself gave us a speech during the welcome banquet. I have that all recorded. I'm not going to be able to show you the whole thing, but essentially he wished us luck on our games, and he expressed how happy it is that the game came together and was able to be played at this level at this stage. And without further ado, let's actually get into some of the games where friends are going to have to fight against friends. NA versus NA.
Here we are, buddy. I was right all along. You were just another threat to Rubicon.
Alright, day 4, Battlefield NA. Before the match, Orca and EMP agreed that they would support each other in the other bracket no matter who wins there. But I don't really feel comfortable talking about this match too much because it's basically like a match between friends, and I kind of knew how this was going to go down even before it ended, because Orca just had a much better setup and they knew what each member were doing. And as I was discussing before, EMP kind of was a mishmash of like a lot of different elements, and they didn't have a lot of practice time during the given practice days, but also like beforehand, so their team composition isn't quite solidified yet. So Orca obviously had like a massive advantage here just because they're a team that have played together and trained together for a long time. So of course they won. I think that Orca definitely deserves to win because they got their shit together, and EMP still had a bit to figure out. I want people to understand that both of these teams were mechanically top-notch, right? Like, these were probably some of the best players in the community that we knew. The difference between the two teams were the composition, the organization, and the communication. And those three things are like so generalized and vague that like you might think like, oh, yeah, we get it, communication. But when you really get down to it, that is a really, really important thing to knock out, because like communication is beyond just saying something. Communication is you need that other person to understand what you mean, and you need to be able to reach that mutual understanding in a split of a second when it's in a game like this, or even in like any team sports and stuff like that. So having that skill would be really important, and also it will be really important to have the skill of rallying your team after a loss. And I think like EMP rallied really well after the loss today, because it really clutched up and went back to the drawing board of what their team should look like and how they want to play the game on every map and stuff like that. So they really, really rallied after their loss today, and they didn't let their morale fall. And before we close out day 4, there was a surprising turn for the other NA side. So DSG somehow beat Team Liquid. And Team Liquid was practicing the entire time, but DSG somehow beat Team Liquid despite basically never practicing in the training room ever. And I thought this was really interesting. It shows that DSG was hiding their true firepower, and apparently a lot of them were playing mechs for the first time during that match against Team Liquid. So I was like, oh. Apparently they also had an alpha tester telling them what to do the entire time during the game that they were playing, so DSG had a bit of an advantage there. But also DSG is a team that played together for a long time beforehand. I talked to some of them, and they said that they've played like Overwatch or something together forever. So yeah, that's like totally fair, because team coordination might actually just be individual skill in a lot of the matches Mechabreak hosts, just because like when you're getting down to it, Mechabreak is obviously like a team-based game, and your individual contributions are super important. But what is also more important is how you are able to coordinate as a group. And if I really had to make like a breakdown for it, I would say that Mechabreak at the high level is probably around 80% like team strategies, and about 20% of your raw skill, because everyone is really good. So you're going to have to out-strategize the other person before you can overpower them with your raw skill. So it's okay to have like aces and stuff like that, but it is probably more important to have some of the other soft skills like communication and like coordination and organization, and having the flexibility to play other strikers and stuff that we talked about. Those are also super important, and if you can get those down beforehand, before you enter the arena, then you have a solid thing going on. Day 5, Ying and Yang. Now, Orca versus Anubis was a tough-ass round. Anubis is the top dogs of that competitive environment in the practice room, which we, scrimmed for several days. Finding them myself only, cemented that idea. And this was the only time where I got to fight an international team, because I wasn't subbed in for basically any other game, which I am thankful of, because I did not really want to play. And I got to fight the most experienced and the toughest opponents, toughest team in the entire tournament round. And boy, that was actually kind of fun. Would I want to do that again? Probably, but probably with a little bit more experience and a little bit more training, right? But let's get a little bit in depth with the games. So first thing to note is that Anubis was really hard to ban out. What I mean by that is all of their team members played 1 to 3 strikers. And this is something that you're going to have to do in the future when there's more strikers in the game, right? So Orca's plan was to ban out a melee character to ensure John Welkin and Salah Pleasant had those melee strikers available. So we banned Welkin to secure the big boy later, and I subbed in for Tricera on the first map. So this had a pretty good value where the enemy team was also forced to sub out their melee-centric plays because, Welkin was very, very much the prime killer, trapper, defender, literally everything in the entire tournament. But Anubis also had to switch off Welkin. But their ability to, adapt, and their ability and their knowledge to play other strikers made that our bans just didn't work out. Orca's melee players, John Welkin and Sal Peasant, would have had a hard time if they were forced to play Stego or Tricera. Not so for Anubis. The Anubis melees performed exceptionally well on an off pick, on a heavy pick. And that is very, very important to know. So the most important fight on the Eye of Misra was the A fight. Now, MDB, Inferno got a crucial interrupt on the enemy Falcon and turned that capture into a brawl. Now, this is really important because we actually started to win that brawl in the beginning. So we picked off the enemy Inferno and also their Luminate. So you would think that, hey, it was a 4v6 kind of situation. That means we would win that fight, right? That's what we thought in the middle of the game too. But eventually when I went back and looked at it, it was a very different situation because despite us having the numerical advantage, our listeners was in little tiny baby mode and our sniper Happy was being harassed by the enemy Falcon. So the Tricera Stego, me and Deacon's a very good Stego, we got trapped because we spent all of our cooldowns and HP killing the Inferno and the Luminate. But the enemy heavies, the two melee players that I was talking about that switched on the heavy, they still had all their cooldowns and HP. So Super Dupa and Rehaze were able to just crawl forward with that Tricera and Stego combo and absolutely obliterate us using all of their biggest cooldowns. So they did a kill, and we eventually lost a point as our heavy line started to fall apart and our other members started to get picked off. And after A, our game plan fell apart. And I will fully admit, part of it is my fault because I did not have enough games with Orca in order to adapt to Deacon's Stego playstyle. He plays pretty aggressively to support his melee players, but when playing with a Tricera player, we needed to figure out each other's positions and stack on top of each other. So we got staggered immensely, and because it is Eye of Misra, the spawn points are everywhere. That was just, so you get back on it, we're like, we could have won that. We definitely could have. And that's the beauty of it, I think, in esports sometimes, or in any game that you play. If you could have won that game, go back and watch it. Record your games if you want to improve. Go back and watch it and get somebody with better knowledge to watch it with you. That way you can point out the little mistakes that you can make and make a plan for tomorrow. So we did go back and watch these games and make more plans for tomorrow. Especially we noticed that, people were getting caught on transition going to C or to A, and that Orca was more suited for the double melee all-out brawl assassin playstyle. And what is the takeaway from that one Eye of Misra game? Well, looking back on it, the takeaway is that regrouping is a very, very key skill in Mechabreak. Regrouping is sort of easy for a lot of games. Like if you play Rivals or Overwatch or something like that, you know that you're always going to spawn in the spawn room. In Mechabreak, you don't get that luxury. There is no spawn room. There is only a para drop as you're coming down. And the only way you can really sync with players, or at least in this current build, is you have to try to time your deaths and time your respawns. If you're respawning one by one, it's actually really bad, right? Because every time you die, your death timers increase, making it harder and harder for you to come back onto the map. So if you don't respawn with your teammates, you get caught and you die. And it's really easy to die on some strikers in this game. And some advanced tips for that is have a secondary shot caller. So what we started to do in both, I don't know if we started doing Orca, but we definitely did it in EMP, where we would have two shot callers. One was the offense shot caller, and the second would be the defensive shot caller, where you would have someone coordinate the defense or the regrouping when the primary shot caller is off. And that's pretty important. You can spectate, obviously, in the game, but the person who is playing would probably have more sense of it than the person who's watching other people in the spectator after they're dead. So definitely try to have more than one shot caller in the game. There is no coaching position during that time. That might change. So, but right now, the respawn and regrouping, secondary shot caller is definitely needed. And Anubis knew that. Anubis played a really good defensive game, especially on the second game on that Krob sinkhole. Man, Krob sinkhole's defenses were hard to break. They played so well, holding 2 points the entire freaking time. The most decisive thing, I think, in my opinion, that got them the win was the Ulysses ban. The Ulysses ban we thought was troll, but it actually wasn't. And this was the gap between game knowledge and game experience between Japan and NA. Anubis somehow knew that Welkin was actually pretty weak to Panther in a team environment. Now, we didn't know that because nobody in the fucking top 100 in NA was really playing Panther like that. And we all saw that Panther was a bottom tier pick, which he really is without pick and ban. If Ulysses is not in the game, Panther actually gets very good value harassing Welkin. Our Welkin was a solo melee during that game. And they had double melee. They had a Panther and they had a Welkin. And the Panther's entire job was just to distract us. Like, he didn't get that much value out of the game, but he didn't kill anyone. He wasn't like really assassinated, but he was stalling. He was stalling so hard. He was on the Stego. He was on Welkin. He was running around dying. He died a couple more times than, some of our team, but he was there to disrupt and distract and ruin our team composition. And the fact that John Welkin was distracted the entire game meant that we did not have any capping power compared to their team, which had a Welkin on the front line. So despite Orca having great players, having a pretty good strategy, we got gapped. We got gapped in the defensive knowledge, the regrouping, and we got gapped in the game knowledge was the Panther pick. And you know what? That's totally fair. Anubis deserves to win that match because they just had more things prepped for us. And that is sort of like the regional gap that I was thinking of at the time. Like, man, if we had more Panther players, or man, if we were able to get a couple more games in the scrims with me in it and playing with Deacon more, might have been different for us. But, hey, that's okay. We knew that Anubis was the strongest team in the entire scrimming environment. So we went back and reviewed the footage. We knew what was going on and started to strategize for tomorrow. Japanese teams, on average, were stronger than other regions. Why? Well, it's because they had a ton of arena movement games in their history. The most popular one right now is obviously Gundam versus Extreme Boost 2. That is arena 2v2 fighter that focuses a lot on cutting, teamwork, and also movement to dodge enemy abilities and projectiles. Those skills translate really, really well into Mechabreak. This is because Mechabreak often have a lot of team fights, but can section off into 2v2s, 3v3, or 1v1s in the different sectors of the map. And when it comes down to it, the JP players are really, really good at taking those smaller fights. But, obviously Anubis aren't slacking in the big fights as well. And they know how to play defensively. Because in Gundam Extreme, they do have to play conservatively. Because when you lose, or when you die, you lose a significant chunk of your points. And you only really have 1 or 2 lives. And that's what I noticed from playing Japanese players. They don't want to die. They're like rats. They hide and then they escape. They want to preserve their life as much as possible, which is what, every team should be trying to do. But, that doesn't mean that, China or NA players were any less good than JP players. I just think that the JP players had a lot more experience with arena type stuff. So, for example, Orca had some of the best one tricks, I think, in the tournament. They had a lot of Aquila stuff. They had EMP had probably the best Falcon Ragnorok in the entire tournament. I know Happiness is best Aquila probably in the entire tournament. So NA had a lot of one tricks, but what suffered today was probably the things that we didn't get to see before, like the Panzer pick. And that is awesome because I want to see more strategies that were never seen before in NA, so that cross-region dissemination, I don't know why I phrased it like that, is a thing. And I want the strategies to spread and for everybody to get better. And despite Orca losing out on day 5, it was an understandable loss. But EMP does get another shot at this. So we're going to go on to EMP versus NGT. So I talked about EMP having trouble with their composition before, but this day 5, is where they find their true composition. With Celia on tanking, mainly with Tricera. Caldian coming back with some flex picks between tank and DPS. We have Magical Abyss on Inferno now instead of support. Yarlia on the melee, as always. Ragnorok on flyers, both Falcon and also Sky Raider being picked up. And Zakev on healer instead of tank. And this took a lot of hard work to get here because of our previous conceptions of what the meta is or what people should be playing. But we found the composition and it was good. It worked so well for them. It plays to everybody's strength instead of what we thought they should be playing, right? And although they suffered 1 loss against NGT in the first round on Karab Sinkhole, EMP played an absolutely clinical second game. The game on Shipyards was perfect. We're talking transitioning into the high ground. We're talking holding your own on every single capture objective. We're talking about triple heavy setup. Absolutely amazing stuff. Focusing capping on B and C, which are the most important points, and getting that high ground advantage on the A point on Harbor was so good. It's an absolutely great idea, great strategy. The biggest benefit of their triple heavy composition was that they're just able to hold a lot of ground, they have a lot of HP to burn through, and also they were able to stay on cart the entire time. It was perfect, and that is what they are comfortable with. Going to the final round, they're going to play on Sky City. The deciding match, if they get knocked out here, they get knocked out of the tournament. And I want to use this Sky City game to talk about something that is pretty crucial and I don't think like many people are talking about. So I talked about Extreme Versus, but another thing about Extreme Versus is that you have to like pressure people with boost gauge and cooldowns and stuff like that in order to capture a win, because if everybody has full resources, you're never going to be able to pull out the win. And this is like, a common idea in other games. In fighting games, in shooting games like Overwatch or Rivals or whatever, or even in strategy games. You want to like put pressure on the enemy resources. And in Mechabreak, this is mostly your boost gauge and also your long cooldowns. Because in the February beta, there were some really, really long cooldowns. You have to start burning them in order to secure kills. So right here, Magic is pressuring the enemy Welkin, and with Welkin box and also their energy filter down, or energy smoke down, they are forced to go on the defensive, but without those defensive options, there was never going to be escape from an Inferno, right? But before that, you have to start burning their cooldown. They were able to use Ragnorok's Falcon in order to burn some of the Welkin cooldowns, and for Inferno to come in to get that landing blow. EMP also did a great job on Sky City, where they are able to bait NGT into a final desperate attack, but NGT were already getting pinned down by harassing fire. So when they ran into EMP, they just could not do it. But you have to set that up. It's a lot of pressure, and that's like hard to tell you through a video or a camera right now. I would like have to go into game and then like VOD review every second of it, which we kind of don't have time for in this video. This is already a really long video. So if you want to see that, tell me in the comments. When the game comes out, I would love to do some VOD reviews. So then with that overtime kill, I think Stego fell off the map right there. Oh no. So with that overtime kill, EMP has shown that they have the skills to keep fighting in the tournament. And overall, it was a great hyping day 2 of the tournament. There is something I would like to highlight though, was Shuffle and CLGG eventually creating a dojo-like environment on Sky City, where they would send in one-on-one contestants in the middle of the map in order to fight against each other. And I thought that was a particularly cool way to end the day, especially because it just shows that a lot of the people who are participating in this invitational are friendly. Day 6, the Climax. So during all this time that I've spent in Zhuhai, I've come to talk to a lot of like career esports people, or like developers, or like people who work in the video game industry, or like the entertainment industry and stuff like that. And I used to work in hotel and tourism and stuff like that. I've met like a couple of mayors in my past, but man, the esports stuff is fun, and I really want to be in the room where it happens. So I got to focus on what I am good at, which is basically hyping stuff up and also organizing events and stuff. And I really want to do that, because man, day 6 is a day to remember. It is going in my core memory as probably the hypest I've ever been about any game, sports, esports, ever. So what happened on day 6? Now on day 6, EMP was fighting against CSTG the first time. And well, CSTG is kind of a fan favorite, I've heard, of the Chinese community. They have some popular streamers on there, and they have like a pretty popular Panther player on their team as well. And the first match EMP went up against CSTG was on halberd. And if you know anything about halberd, is that EMP plays a damn well halberd. EMP went was their classic heavy combo, the new one that they have perfected through their many trials and errors. And they played an absolutely clinical game where they were up 30% against CSTG. 30% at one point. It was crazy. They were able to transition onto the high ground really well, and also then focus on the Tricera before point 2, which allowed them a very massive lead. So well done on EMP on that game. Their second game on the Observatory was really well done as well. They've definitely mastered the art of stacking, because they were stacking all kinds of defensive options onto each capture point. And I think that in before they were actually kind of weak on Observatory. Now seeing how far they come, on Observatory makes me really proud, because they were able to just be on the capture point every single time it spawned and stack everybody together in order to get that point. And like, one of the things that you should be doing on Observatory is helping your teammates transition, and EMP was doing that hella well. They were able to help their heavy players transition, while CSTG were being focused fire down whenever they pop up. And if I had to describe how EMP was playing, I would probably describe them as sort of like heavy bunkers and airstrikes. I think that's a really good way to describe it. They have a lockdown bunker forward position, and then they have like Inferno or like a Falcon and a Sky Raider just flying around overhead, being a constant nuisance and preventing the enemy from encroaching on their bunkers. Orca also ended up playing Observatory that day, and you can see clear as daylight the difference between their respective playstyles, because Orca really focused on assassination. I mean, we talked about it before, where their style is kill, kill, kill. They have 4 attackers, so Orca's composition is a lot lighter, and they also started to switch over Happiness to Sky Raider for some testing runs. So the second Orca game was also a really good representation on how much they don't need Tricera. They are the only team, basically, in the entire tournament space that don't play Tricera as one of their mains, so props to them. And they're able to use that ban mechanic to a very, very good degree. Since they don't play Tricera, they're just going to ban Tricera and deny everybody else the advantage of doing so. So that is a really, really good way to use the ban system to their favor, and I love that they're able to bring this sort of tech to the international stage. EMP versus MDY was also the battle of the Falcons, or at least that's what the cameras told us. MDY had a very good Falcon throughout the playtime of the tournament, and Ragnorok was, or is, one of the top Falcons in the world, so they were having a very good battle during that round against each other. I think Mingyu was and is a very good Falcon player, but Ragnorok just surpassed them at every level. And this is a good time to glaze every member of EMP's team. We have Magical Bliss, who has swapped over from support to playing a very good Inferno. He basically haven't been able to play any attacker roles, but when he switched over to Inferno on day 3, he has played it like a champ at the level of all of the other international teams. And Zakev, who switched from tank over to support, is the slipperiest Luminate you will ever see. That man is just like a butterfly. Nobody's able to hit him. He's always dodging and weaving. It is insane thing to look and see. And you know, Kalnian, who have been asked to play literally every role in the game, have become incredibly flexible, because you know how EMP was struggling with their team composition. He tried to fill every role that he could. And man, he has become a really, really flexible player who's able to play tank, attacker, and sniper, all kinds of roles, and fill whatever gap the team needs. Yarlia, their melee, can play every single melee character on the roster now, because again, because of these guys having to experiment so much, they're able to be really flexible with their team composition and team picks. So often we will see Yarlia switch between Welkin and Alyssa's if Welkin is banned, and their team captain is Celia, who usually plays stuff like Hurricane, now is stepping into a traditional tank role, who is able to position themselves really well and think about where they need to be before the time comes. And like, that is a skill that I think not many people have, and more people should try to emulate. Like, in this game, you have to know where you should be every segment of the game. EMP versus MDY was a total wipe. Like, EMP was totally on top of their game. Complete victory over MDY, which lead us to probably the final NA game in this day. And that is Orca versus EXT. I will glaze every single moment of Orca versus EXT. It is a fantastic round. I think probably the best NA round that have been played, because it was nail biting. It was down to the wire. It was everything that you want to see in competitive esports. Orca really played their heart out for this one. On Sinkhole, Orca was looking like they were just going to lose. So at the very end, Orca makes a desperate but brilliant play of throwing everything they have at the problem. And they managed to capture 3 points on Sinkhole. And they were down, I think, like 500 points or something like that. And man, EXT was so incredibly close to winning, and Orca had a long way to go. So the only point of which Orca could win that game was if they hold all 3 points the entire time and not let EXT get back a single point for the rest of the game. One tick basically can take Orca off the map. Or, you know, it was like first best of 3, but still, it was really important. You don't want to be losing maps. And Orca did it. Despite all odds, despite everything, they managed to hold EXT at every single point. And this really plays into their fantastic composition of like a lot of attackers, making them very mobile and able to disrupt. I mean, even though they don't have the defensive power to sort of like hold ground, they can dance around and delay until EXT runs out of steam. And that's what they ended up doing. And it was a fantastic time to be in there in person, because as this was happening, as the 3 points were captured, the room where it happened started to become loud with excitement. The casters, all in all languages, became excited at the prospect that Orca might be able to hold all 3 points against EXT, and by God, they did. Super awesome game. Definitely should check that out in its full. I also wanted to highlight some things that the cameras weren't highlighting. For example, there were times where Deacon was holding the middle B point, and Charlotte on Luminate was going back and forth holding 2 points as well with her drones, on the Luminate drones. And that's really important to show, I think, in a broad perspective. And then that is something for the Mechabreak sort of like casting team, or like the camera team, to, I believe, improve on. The second game against EXT was probably equally as exciting as the first. So the second game against EXT was majorly fought on Harbor. And if you know anything about Harbor, you would know that there is a need for heavies on that map. And you know what? Orca didn't ban the heavy on that map. Instead, they banned Luminate. And this would become known as the Great Luminate ban, in my opinion. Why? Because, well, there's only 2 healers in the game. And I talked about this way before in maybe like a meta review or something like that, where if you have heavies, you want to have Luminate. Luminate has that AoE heal. Luminate is able to pump out a lot of energy recovery for the heavies as well, helping them transition. It has the heal cloud. It has more healing per second than Bianca at that moment. And if you have a lot of like squishies, you want to have Bianca, because Bianca can give you that shield for that extra health buffer. So in a case where Bianca is actually like Omega nerfed, in that February patch, Lumine was the Queen Supreme of the support class, which means also heavies are super very good. And by banning Lumine, we have cucked the heavies to a lot amount. There's not a lot of healing going on. And because Orca plays so aggressively with smaller HP pool strikers, Panaka doesn't have to work as hard in order to repair all of them. So this means that by picking Panaka, or banning Lumine and forcing teams to pick Panaka, Orca has put themselves in a very advantageous situation that played out in their favor towards the end. Because I'm gonna be honest, Orca was kind of losing this one, not gonna lie, for the majority of the game again. In the beginning, EXT has a really good setup, but it's not impossible to recover from. Because again, Harbor is the great equalizer map in my opinion. If you are like not as good as the enemy team, you kind of want to be picking Harbor, because if you control, if you get B and C point, if you have like good control of C point, you can actually make a really big comeback compared to some of the other maps where, like, if you're not as good as the other team, like on Sinkhole or something like that, you're probably not going to be able to get all of those point backs at the end, because there is just no comeback mechanic as big as there are on Harbor. And one of the things that Orca did was, despite losing out on cart pushing in the beginning, they are able to bring it back by their aggressive, I guess, striker composition. They were able to wear down the HP pool of all of the EXT members at the end of the game past that C point push. And because Lumine was banned, their heavies couldn't get the healings that they needed. And EXT was on a razor's edge to winning that thing. But because everybody was low, they were able to finish off the heavies before they can get healed and just go wild with the John Welkin spin on the cart at the last moments, leading to an Orca victory against EXT at a very crucial moment. And that moment was so spectacular that the Chinese casters dubbed John Welkin the John Well King.
大批就是把你车上人给解决掉，再批，还有说法自己是刚爆甲回来的，他必须顶住车上的压力，车停了，红侧方车停了，甚至被推倒车了
95%对91%，这个时候ES减员一个骑兵，欧卡能抓住这个机会反超吗？93%又减少原骑兵，
又是这样吗？欧卡又要
95%对97%。 都有机会3%。
哎，上车，又上车了。
世骁上车，开始无敌风5轮转，继续转到了5个骑兵。欧卡要反超了99%。
赵维尔又一个击坠王，
欧卡的赤骁太棒了。
How do you feel, John Welkin?
I feel extremely.
Take a picture. You got an A. You got an A. Holy, 2 incredible games. Oh my God. You guys feel like the most fun team. So close. That so first close. Game, holy shit. It was so close.
Point management at the ends had to be
like
optimal.
Oh yeah, I was watching both points like
Permanently, perhaps, cementing him in Mechabreak history. So off of those fantastic wins, we celebrated with some barbecue and beer, like all good wins should be celebrated with. For the love of God, if you ever visit China, please pick up some Chinese barbecue. Especially the lamb skewers. Those lamb skewers, man. And the reason why I named this day the Climax is because I knew that the next day was going to be extremely hard wall to climb. EMP was going up against Lunabrake, probably the second best Japan team. Orca was going up against Celestial Being, probably the first or second best Chinese team. It was going to be an extremely hard time. I think that I was really happy that the teams were able to come thus far already. You know, some people stayed at the training room after the dinner to strategize. Some people went out and just had a bit of resting in the hotel room. But the people who I was hanging out with, we got some Chinese ice cream. And Chinese ice cream is pretty freaking good if you get like the awesome flavors. And I remember Deacon had this like cantaloupe ice cream cone. And we were strategizing about what should Orca do against Celestial Bean. And I was walking around in the training room and I saw that Celestial Bean was watching the Orca VODs. I was like, okay, Deacon, go over there to Celestial Bean, and they're watching our VODs right now. It would be really funny if you just like stared at them and then just ate your ice cream. And so he did. He walked over there and he started to stare into the camera at them, licking the ice cream. Like, I don't want to lick my like he will not. Like just wide-eyed, looking at the camera, licking the ice cream. And what he did was funny, and then he kept doing it for like 2 to 3 minutes. And I was just looking at him, paralyzed in laughter, because he was making eye contact with a poor Celestial Beam member. He was just licking the ice cream and making eye contact with him, and he didn't like break eye contact with that guy. And the guy on Celestial Beam was trying his best to look away and focus on discussing with his team members on the strategies that they needed to employ. But he kept having to look back at Deacon because Deacon would not break contact, and just kept going on for like 3 minutes or so before the NA community manager told me to get Deacon the hell out of there. And I was so paralyzed with laughter, I didn't know what to say, because like you had to be there. It was so awkward, yet extremely hilarious at the same time. I didn't know what to say to get him out there. So I, in my inebriated state, said the only thing that I could think of. And I said in Chinese, sorry, he didn't take his meds, and I took him away, leaving Celestial Bean to be permanently mental gapped by the NA teams. They probably think we're a whole bunch of stupid retards, but man, that culminated in at the end of the match between Celestial Bean and Orca. Deacon actually met the guy he was staring at again, and he told me that during the handshake, the guy was so desperately trying not to break down at the sight of Deacon. So basically, my suggestion to you then is you have to try to break your enemy's morale in order to win. And you should do it while eating ice cream and just like staring at them or something. Because if you don't, you will never be able to secure a victory. And yeah, that's definitely gonna be a core memory of mine. I'm gonna keep remembering the ice cream story forever and ever. God damn it, cantaloupe ice cream. I need to get some when I go back.
Whatever game you're playing, it won't work. You can't defeat me.
No, I know. But he can.
Day 7, the final day. I call this day the Ragnorok. Why? Because both Orca and EMP are about to go up against some of the strongest gatekeepers that I was talking about in the beginning of the video. They're going against Lunabreak and Celestial Beam. Now, EMP is up first, and they're going up against Lunabreak. So, EMP fighting Lunabreak was on Harbor, the first map, and EMP bans Welkin, Lunabreak bans Stego. I believe Lunabreak went first, and this was a problem, I think, where the ban was ultimately rushed and didn't have a very good effect for our team. Like, your bans should always, positively affect your team. And because of Stego ban, and because of the welcome ban, the enemy team was free to run 2 laser heavies, which is Hurricane and Inferno. And because of the welcome ban, Inferno is free to roam. And Yui's Inferno for Lunar Break was an absolute goddamn menace that EMP just not managed to shut down in time. And the whole game was lost on C point. At C point, EMP was scattered all around. They didn't manage to regroup, and they were picked off one by one by the overwhelming amount of laser fire there were on the map. And if Welkin wasn't banned, Welkin would have been able to use its smoke screen to better effects than the Sky Raider. I mean, of course, there were Sky Raiders on the map to try to counter the heavy laser heavies, but it wasn't enough, and you needed both smoke screens in order to make it happen. The second map that EMP fought Lunar Break on was Karab Sinkhole, and this was also, in my opinion, a bit of a strategic mistake. Now, of course, I'm using the infinite power of hindsight here in order to explain why that was a mistake. So essentially, we had scouting info on Lunar Break on the Karab Sinkhole, and it was when I was playing with EMP on the first day when they had a member down. And Lunar Break played really, really well Karab Sinkhole just due to the fact that they had one of the only Narukami mains in the entire tournament. I mean, Laura X is a fantastic rat of a Narukami who can stay on the walls and plank down at you, or stay in the back and snipe off the most important target at exactly the right times. And it was such a pain in the ass to deal with in the scrims on the first scrimming day. I couldn't imagine what it was like to play against that in an actual competitive. Man, I knew that EMP's Karab Sinkhole map was actually weak. And I think they should have played Observatory. Even if Laura X was good on Narukami, Observatory would still allow their primary flyer, Ramen Rook, to run around and try to harass the sniper. But in this case, picking Sinkhole, one of their weakest maps, against Lunar Break's strongest, one of their strongest maps, was, I feel like, in hindsight, of course, an absolute strategic mistake. But that's okay. Things happen. And with that, with Laura X's wonderful, wonderful Narukami plays, EMP fell apart. Lunar Break were insane. And they are the second best Japanese team in the entire tournament. So I don't feel bad at all that EMP lost to these guys. And I hope that Lunar Break comes back the next tournament so that NA can have another shot at defeating them, because their skills are the real deal. And this does mean that EMP ends the tournament run at the 6th place out of the tournament rankings. Next up, Orca versus Celestial Beings. Now this is kind of I don't know, I would say that it was destiny to be like this. Celestial Being fights against Orca, and Orca used to be Team Celestial. So it's a Celestial versus Celestial matchup. And remember how I was talking about the ice cream story and how Celestial Being was researching Orca's, VODs and stuff like that? Well, they knew, I feel like, from watching Orca's VODs, that Orca played a very good, aggressive game. But they don't play defensive very well. And I feel like they exploited that to its fullest, because MDB, their Orca's Inferno player, was hunted down like an animal every single time he spawned, and it was a brutal case of picking apart an assassin team. Celestial Being definitely hunted the Aquila happiness as well, and they just focused on the range dealers before turning their sights onto the melees. After losing the first Harbor map, Orca decided to go with Eye of Mizra. And now, with my infinite power of hindsight, I would tell you that when I was there, live, on the side room, watching them play, I saw on the big screen, they picked I have Mizra. And I was like, what? I have Mizra. And then they banned Aquila. I was like, what? They banned Aquila? One of their best picks on one of their most important players? That was a crazy pick. They almost gambled really well. And they almost had some really good game-winning kills. But I feel like because they banned out themselves, again, this is more like a strategic thing, right? I can't really control how to play the play-by-play. You can't really control that when you are watching from the sideline. But you can arm your team with the strategic knowledge that bans should benefit your team. And I don't think that Aquila ban benefited Orca as maybe some of another ban for a heavy or something like that would have been. Eye of Mizra is one of those maps where you have to fight and kill before you can really cap the objective. And man, Orca was almost there because they're very aggressive team composition. And I felt like if they just had the Aquila in some of these scenarios, they would have been able to secure more kills in order for them to eventually get the objectives. But again, that is just the hindsight. And Orca did play really well against China's best. And that means that Orca ended up in the 5th spot overall in the tournament rankings. And I think that it's important to learn from our defeat here because, again, we were going up against really good teams. We are basically on the top 6, right? And the thing is, if we had more time to prepare, we probably could have prepared both teams more for like the flexibility part. We could have asked everybody to play to the streak strikers just in case their mains or their secondary mains get banned out on a specific map. We could have asked these people to prepare more strategic thinking in advance for the pick and ban phase. But at every turn of this trip, we've had to deal with challenges upon challenges, and our conceptions of the meta keeps getting flipped and flipped and flipped. We had to deal with a lot of sickness that I believe other teams didn't have to do because, you know, we're Americans traveling into Asia. So a lot of the viral sicknesses affected our teams more than the other teams. We had our regional strength really tested here because the Asian servers had more players playing despite the February beta not being really well received. So there were more top players on the Asian servers than there were in the North American servers, which, you know, fair enough. Mecha is niche here in the States. There was a lot of challenges to get to that point. And if we had more time, which I think this is like the infinite prep time problem that you sometimes would like hear when you are arguing which superhero would beat Batman. Well, if Batman had infinite prep time, he would literally be able to beat like anybody in DC or something like that. But we don't. And we have to use the prep time that we are given. And I think this is a very good point to reflect on our losses and prepare for next time. Because I really do want to foster more competitive teams to be able to go to something like this in the future, or even just like in our community tournaments, because this game was hella fun and I want to bring the ban system to the NA community tournaments for sure. And at the end of the day, I am super proud of the 2 community tournaments that did end up making it this far. You know, we could have had EMP knocked out on the 2nd round. We could have had Orca being absolutely random into like Anubis and then Celestial being and just like completely crushed by the competition in the first part. And you know what? All of this, even the 5th and 6th spot, I consider to be really good. And maybe some people might not agree to that. You know, maybe some people are only looking to the 1st and 2nd spots. But in my opinion, considering everything, considering the regional strength, considering the prep time we had, considering the challenges, the sicknesses that we had to overcome, I think this was a pretty good run. And I'm really proud of them for being able to reach top 6 in the first place. Day 8, the future is pretty bright. The sun is in my eyes right now. The last day was pretty special for the players. They actually got to go around to some of the malls in China, but for me, I had to take care of another emergency for half of the day. But the last day, At night, we got a little something special. Obviously, there was that wrap-up party where there's some drinks, signature signings, all the players were there, fun stuff, right? But beyond that, there was something neat in the training room. You see, they actually unlocked all of the developer build for us to play for one last hoorah in the middle of the night, basically. And we all had flights to catch the next day, but that didn't stop most of us from playing all night. And honestly, I would say that if that developer build was released today, it's going to be a one hell of a game. It's going to be one awesome game release, and Mechabreak would be cemented in like mecha game history. I can't tell you a single damn thing on that build, but I can tell you that it is awesome. All the players who were there will probably say that, you know, this game is fucking awesome. If they just figure out the monetization portion of Mechabreak and release it onto the market, I think it would genuinely be one of the best free-to-play games of all times on Steam. I would have played that build all night if I could, genuinely. But we had flights to catch in the morning, so heading off to sleep. And after 4 more emergencies involving people getting sick, involving me losing my wallet, we finally arrived back in the States. The NA team is back, and that brings the total amount of emergencies up to 10. Wow. 1 for each day I was there, basically. And that is the life of a manager sometimes, man. It's pretty hard, but I think it's all worth it in the end, because I enjoyed the trip with all my heart. I love facilitating the players. I met wonderful people along the way, and I can't wait for this game to come out. And I'll see you there when it does come out. If you have any critiques on this video, please let me know. I know that there's probably going to be a lot of cuts. The filming environment is very different. It's a very, very long video, probably without that much of my usual edits. Probably the audio is screwed because of all this as well. But honestly, it's an interesting experiment, and I can't wait to do more of this. Please, if you have critiques, let me know in the comments. And yeah, thank you for watching till the end of the video. Please touch some grass, get some water. I'll see you next time.